Are they coming for our guns?
The Second Amendment is absolutely under attack.
As a citizen of the United States, this matters for all of us.
We have constitutional carry here.
Conceal and carry without a permit. Certainly that meant gunpowder, musket balls, ammunition, accessories, bayonets. It shall not be infringed. People sometimes forget about that one under the Biden-Harris administration. And she's more than happy to put Missourians out of work in order to disarm the American population. And I'm not going to let that happen.
We all read the letter of Mr. Mark Zuckerberg.
The Zuckerberg letter.
And the Zuckerberg letter coerced, co-opted, and cajoled by federal officials. There are big tech oligarchs and radical progressive lefts that want to violate our right to talk about our other rights. Remember, the First Amendment covers not only your right to speak, but my right to hear from you. The government was demanding censorship, and big tech was carrying it out in violation of our rights to free speech. The big tech oligarchs also don't want your voices heard. Tyranny flourishes in the absence of free, fair, and open debate.
This administration, big tech oligarchs, they think that we're stupid.
They're so scared of freedom.
And they're like, oh, what do you think about men and women's sports? I'm like, I can't believe this is a question.
Denying objective reality is not safe or healthy. It doesn't matter how I feel about the law of gravity. If I jump off a building, I'm going to hurt myself. Convicted sex offender hiding in a women's restroom looking for additional victims. He wasn't there to express his gender identity. He was there to perp on new victims, and luckily law enforcement intercepted him.
I think that it's really just taking things out of order on purpose.
Biden and Harris don't care about the law. They don't care about the Constitution. They care about buying votes. We're on a short timeline here. We have to win the election in November. I mean, everyone hears, oh, this is the most critical election in our nation's history. Well, this time it's true. Make it too big to rig.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are. Welcome to a brand new show that we are doing. If you've noticed, directly to my left or my right, I'm not exactly sure where the editor will put her, but we have Alexis Wilkins with us today.
Hello.
And basically what we're going to do is, leading up to the election, I thought it'd be great if we had, what do you think about this show name? At least, I'm all over the place. We're going to have a new show where we are going to be interviewing different people regarding to politics to get an idea of what's really going on in the world, especially so that we can be informed going into election season. I think this would be a great idea. It's actually Alexis's idea. And I thought we'd call it Truth in Politics. What do you think?
I like it. I think it's right on the nose. It's what we're trying to do. So aptly named.
Yeah, so that's kind of what it is. We're going to try to bring in different guests, and depending on where in the country we are, because I travel a lot, you travel a lot. So we're going to try to do this whole remote thing. And today's guest, we have Attorney General Andrew Bailey. And if you guys are not familiar, we did a podcast with him before, but he's what I consider one of the good ones. And we're going to talk about gun rights. We're going to talk about censorship. We're going to talk about whatever else they're doing in Missouri to help us out. And they're always fighting with the Biden administration. So that's what we have today. Alexis, maybe give a quick spiel and hello so that the people know who you are.
Yeah, so I am a political commentator, and I have my show over on Rumble called Between the Headlines. And I ask a lot of questions, as does Matt. And so we decided that we needed some answers. I work with PragerU as a political commentator, a couple other venues for, as Matt said, truth. And we just decided, we talk a lot about these things in our actual conversations on the phone, and how do we make sure that people go into voting booths knowing what they're talking about and knowing what they're voting for. There's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of media, there's a lot of money being made, and we just wanted to strip it down to, the people need a lawyer, the voters need a lawyer, and someone's got to ask the right questions. And here we are, asking the right questions, hopefully. Hopefully you guys feel better after this.
And brand new segment, brand new show. I'm not exactly sure how often we're going to do this, but I think it may be more often than we think. What do you think?
I think so too. I think once we get in here into the weeds of it, we're going to go, oh no, we got a couple people to talk to, and hopefully maybe they'll have ideas. Maybe there'll be requests of, hey, we want to hear from this person. I saw this person do this segment on this. I think it it'll be an interactive format, hopefully, and people will find it helpful. So I hope that we do more rather than less, leading into, 68 days as of today.
And if there are, for the people watching, if there's anyone that you would like us to talk to, that you would like to get information from, that you think needs a platform, or you're just curious, drop a comment, let us know who should we go get next. We have Attorney General Andrew Billy with us today. Amazing to have you. Thank you for being back on the show.
Hey, man, appreciate you having me on and all the important information that you put out about the work we're doing, fighting and winning for freedom, for the Second Amendment, and for the American people, and certainly here in Missouri.
I mean, you've been extremely busy. I can't think of any attorney general out there that's in the news as much as you are, that seems to be fighting for our rights as much as you are. And you are fighting for all Americans' rights, although you're the Attorney General of Missouri.
Yeah, look, the Constitution matters to me. I mean, we have a Constitution to protect us from the government, and the government exists to protect our rights. And oh, by the way, those rights come from God, not man. And so, being in the fight to protect those rights at a point in time in this nation's history when they're under attack and unelected federal bureaucrats and the radical progressive left are hell-bent on taking those rights away from us. It's a really critical moment in our country's history. And I'm proud of the work I've done leading the Missouri Attorney General's office and being at the forefront of so many of these issues.
So I think the first one we want to get into is gun rights. And man, are we far enough into this interview where I can say the word gun? Because we're going to get into censorship too. Because you can't say gun early on in a video. It gets taken down.
Isn't that crazy? It's crazy that we live in a world where there are big tech oligarchs and radical progressive lefts that want to violate our right to talk about our other rights. That's a scary world. And so when we talk about this critical moment in this nation's history, I mean, really, that's where the rubber hits the road on that stuff. But yeah, man, I mean, fighting for the Second Amendment, it says, the plain text of it says, it shall not be infringed. And the Supreme Court has told us, certainly we understood from the founding fathers and the ratification of the 14th Amendment as well, that the right to keep and bear arms was about an individual's right to protect him or herself from the government, protect his or her home, property, family, friends, neighbors, and community. And that's a fight, that's a right that's always going to be worth fighting for.
Absolutely. Now, when we kind of get into the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which is something that you have been spearheading, and I don't live in Missouri. I used to live in Fayetteville, Arkansas, so I come to Missouri frequently, so love your state. But as a citizen of the United States, this matters for all of us. This isn't just a Missouri issue. This is a broader issue that we should all be paying attention to. Can you walk us through, there's been some back and forth with the way that each amendment affects the act, because I know that, when it was coming down the line, as you said, Second Amendment shall not be infringed, pretty straightforward, or it should be. I think it should be. But they kind of came back with, what Article 6 and then Article 10, can you walk us through the back and forth on this so that voters and constituents can understand what is it, what's going on, and what they need to be paying attention to?
Absolutely. And really, the Second Amendment Preservation Act, SAPA, as I refer to it, is a statute that was enacted by the Missouri General Assembly and signed into law by the Missouri governor 2 or 3 years ago. And the act is about protecting the right to keep and bear arms, but it's also about the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And people sometimes forget about that one. The 10th Amendment says that any authority not given to the federal government or deprived to the states, denied to the states, is enjoyed by the states and the people of the states. It's this residual fount of legal authority for the states. Our federal government is a government of limited authority, and any authority not given to that limited authority, given to the federal government, is then reserved by the states. The states have that residual power. And part of it's referred to as the police power, and it's really the authority to police the population of your state. And so that includes state and local law enforcement. And so what SAPA says is that the state of Missouri will not allow state and local law enforcement to be coerced, co-opted, and cajoled by federal officials in the federal officials' attempts to carry out unconstitutional gun registrations and gun bans. Who could be against that, right? I mean, all we're saying is we're not going to let you come down and tell our people what to do if you're trying to enforce unconstitutional restrictions.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. There's definitely the gray area that shouldn't be a gray area between how the federal government is treating the space between shall not be infringed and what they tell the states they can and cannot do. And so the fact that this is something that they're fighting at all just shows you the level of overreach that they're trying to enact here.
Well, and I see this all the time. Yeah, sorry, man.
Okay. Can I ask a kind of weird curveball to this? So President Trump, when he gets elected, he says he wants to do a mass deportation. And he said he wants to use local police to help do that. How would this affect that? Because that's federal government trying to use local police. At the same time, you're saying that they shouldn't be able to do it. Would that cause a problem then?
Not necessarily. Again, it's because of the way in which the federal government and state governments interact. There are things that the federal government can has the legal authority to do, like enforce the immigration code. And there's things the federal government cannot do, which is like control the state police force in an unconstitutional gun grab. So that's really the distinction: lawful legal federal authority or state authority. The federal government absolutely has the authority and the moral and legal obligation to defend our borders. And so asking the states to assist in investigating criminal enterprises in relation to immigration code and helping to enforce the immigration code, that's not something that is something the federal government can lawfully do. And I think there was a case, I think it was in 2012, dealing with Arizona, and Arizona had basically enacted their own state statutes saying, well, we're going to enforce immigration code because the federal government isn't doing it. And the United States Supreme Court said, well, you're actually preempted because there are already immigration statutes on the books that allow the federal government to come in and request assistance from the locals.
Got you. So that falls under really more of the fact that each state individually can declare, invasion or state of emergency rather than the federal government not saying so, and then they have no help to fix it. So it sounds more of a remedy than the federal government enacting policy. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, again, you're looking at two different lines of legal analysis. When you're talking about a conflict between a state law and a federal law, what you're looking for is preemption. Is the federal law a valid constitutional federal authority? And if it is, does it preempt local authority? And the courts are supposed to find a way to synthesize those two. They want those two to fit together. The court doesn't want to, a federal court should not be eager to strike down state statutes. They're trying to synthesize those, but only where there's a direct conflict between the text of the two does the preemption doctrine prevail. What I'm talking about is different under the 10th Amendment, and really what I'm talking about is the anti-commandeering doctrine, and it stands for the proposition that the federal government can't commandeer the apparatus of state government to do what the federal government has no legal authority to do in the first place.
Really basic question then, just to get it out there. Are they coming for our guns?
I think so. I mean, no question. Look, the federal government, especially in the Biden administration, has ramped up efforts to manipulate the firearm accessory, and ammunition marketplace. Illegal bump stock rule, illegal pistol brace rule, illegal attempt to redefine what constitutes a gun dealer to stop person-to-person gun sales, manipulation of the ammunition marketplace by trying to foreclose or trying to stop civilian sales of ammunition from a plant that produces primarily military-grade ammunition. You also look at the rule in the Department of Commerce that attempted to limit both import and export of firearms. So the Second Amendment is absolutely under attack by a rampant federal bureaucracy under the Biden-Harris administration. And I think the next 4 years are going to be really critical to whether or not we're going to preserve our freedoms. We know that the federal government has failed in its attempts, and states have failed in their attempts to limit an individual's right to keep and bear arms. They lost the head-to-head direct assault. So now what they're trying to do is do an in-run around the Second Amendment and make it to where we can't own accessories and ammunition.
Because I live in Georgia, so we have constitutional carry here, which is great because you don't have to worry about it. There's not a lot of stress about it. You just own a firearm and you're good to go. Is Missouri like that too?
Yeah, Missouri is a constitutional carry state, and you have a right to conceal and carry without a permit. here in the state of Missouri. We have a robust protection of our right to keep and bear arms. It's in Article 1, Section 23 of the Missouri Constitution. And fortunately, here in Missouri, it not only, the text of the constitutional amendment not only explicitly protects the right to keep and bear firearms, but also ammunition and accessories. Those words appear in our Constitution. There's also, it creates a legal obligation on behalf of the state to protect those rights. So when I'm filing lawsuits against the federal government to stop their illegal pistol brace rule, that's what I'm required to do by our Constitution. It's my honor, my duty, my privilege, and not only a legal but moral obligation to fight to protect those things.
So when they try to inflate something like the price or make it just really difficult to get guns or, or ammunition, or like you said, the accessories, how do we go from the core of something like that of course, enshrines our right in Missouri and federally, but specifically you're talking about Missouri, to carry in that constitutional carry? How do we understand, and, I guess not as citizens, but help us understand, how do you fence against them raising prices, making it really difficult to actually get these things so that you can practice, which as a responsible gun owner, you're supposed to be doing, and, and actually have the ability to protect our family and hunt and all the other things that people do with guns?
Well, I think there's two different answers there. Number one, there's the answer of how should the court interpret challenges to those restrictions on ammunition accessories. And there's number two, like, practically speaking, what should attorneys general be doing? So let me start with the first one and say, I think that the way to interpret the Second Amendment is to look at the text, history, and tradition of the words written down and give them the meaning they had at the time they were written down, and through the prism of enactment of the 14th Amendment. So initially, the Bill of Rights only restricted the federal government. It wasn't until passage of the 14th Amendment that the rights in the Bill of Rights were then incorporated against the states. And not all of them have been incorporated yet, but the Second Amendment has. And so, we would look at, well, what did the founders or the drafters and ratifiers of the 14th Amendment, what did the right to keep and bear arms, what did that mean to them? And certainly that meant gunpowder, musket balls, ammunition, accessories, bayonets, all the things that go with the right to keep and bear the gun itself that would be attendant there too. The founders and the drafters and ratifiers of the 14th Amendment would have understood that you need those things to make the gun work, or to practice with the firearm, or to be able to use the firearm. And so you would look at what's being challenged today, and then look at that list of things that would have fit under the text, history, and tradition at the time the words were written down. And is what's being claimed today similar to or dissimilar from that list? And I think by and large you're going to find, and again, I think that's all through the prism of shall not be infringed. And so there should be no restrictions on those kinds of accessories and ammunition. From a practical standpoint, here in Missouri, let me give you an example. So we have the Lake City Ammo Plant, which is run by Olin Winchester, and they make 5.56 ammunition. Primarily, that plant makes ammunition for the Department of Defense. Like 90% of small arms ammunition for the military comes from that plant here in Missouri. It hires working Missouri families, pays them a good wage, keeps people employed, keeps our Department of Defense well armed. But on the side, in order to make money, Olin Winchester, when they're not making bullets for the Army, they make bullets for you and me. They make Winchester ammunition that we fire out of our AR-15s. And what the Letitia James in New York had said was, hey, Joe Biden, you have to tell Lake City to stop making civilian ammo or cancel their contract. Well, at that point, that's a due process violation. Olin Winchester has a property interest in their profits from making that ammunition. And if you dry up the civilian marketplace of ammunition, then the cost to you and me goes up. And so we put a cease and desist letter in place to stop that, and we're successful, because that was a market manipulation designed to drive you and me out of the marketplace and prohibit our ability to buy small arms ammunition.
That's so interesting. So one follow-up on that. What is Letitia James telling the President of the United States, Biden-Harris administration, what is she doing telling them what to do with Missouri? Or anything else for that matter?
Well, and it's because she doesn't give a hoot about our state. She doesn't care about Arkansas or Missouri or any other flyover state. And she's more than happy to put Missourians out of work in order to disarm the American population. And I'm not going to let that happen.
Wow.
Can we shift to censorship? Because this week we all read the letter of Mr. Mark Zuckerberg saying, we knew because we've seen court documents before. We've seen the internal emails about them discussing it and going back and forth with the Biden administration. But he admitted out loud with his own letterhead that, yes, we complied with the Biden administration and we did censor people and we did take people offline. Where does that leave us?
Well, it just proves the evidence that we had already uncovered in the case Missouri v. Biden, one of the most important First Amendment suits in this nation's history, where we had uncovered and demonstrated a coercive relationship from the federal government with oligarchs and big tech social media to silence American voices in violation of our First Amendment right to free speech. And remember, the First Amendment covers not only your right to speak, but my right to hear from you. And so everyone who's ever been censored on big tech at the government's demand, and everyone who was deprived information because of that censorship, all of those rights have been violated. And we got preliminary discovery to get a preliminary injunction, multiple depositions, 20,000 pages of documents or more. We had uncovered the vast censorship enterprise. We obtained the injunction. The Supreme Court said, well, yeah, we agree that there was government censorship on big tech, but the Supreme Court found that our evidence only led us through the years 2020 and 2021. Well, that's because the lawsuit has been pending at the Supreme Court for a year. And so they sent us back down to the trial court level, where we have now commenced merits discovery. And just this week, the trial court judge said, hey, state of Missouri, state of Louisiana, that's our partner in that lawsuit. We also have private plaintiffs. What discovery do you need to push this lawsuit forward? And so we're going to start firing off demands for information to continue to root out the vast censorship enterprise and prove that the government censorship is ongoing. We know it hasn't stopped. And the Zuckerberg letter just demonstrates that what we've been saying all along is true. The government was demanding censorship, and big tech was carrying it out in violation of our right to free speech.
Now, do you think that the Zuckerberg letter was more of an attempt to put, like you said, that they said it was in 2020 and 2021? My feeling, and tell me if this is your feeling also, is that letter was almost done to punctuate when give an end date to when they were issuing the censorship. You know, it doesn't feel like a hero arc or an apology. It feels like, yeah, this is when we stopped doing it. We promise. Please don't go into discovery and do all of this stuff because we stopped.
Leave us alone. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas, you know, I have friends' pages that I click on Instagram as of, you know, yesterday, that it says, are you sure you want to see this post? Are you sure you want to follow this person? Simply because they, you know, are posting patriotic things or political things, or, you know, forbid posting a gun in their profile. Maybe they are involved in firearms. These people are still actively being censored. There was a whole thing I heard where if you put an American flag in your bio, you were being censored. So this is ongoing, as I said, as of yesterday, and we had this letter. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the punctuation is the best adjective to use there, that Mark Zuckerberg wants to get everybody off his back, wants to say, hey, my bad, we won't do it anymore. He's trying to head off the lawsuit so that they can keep censoring without any oversight. I think he also is hedging his bets in case President Trump wins, which he should. You know, I think that Zuckerberg is deeply concerned that President Trump's going to come into office and say, hey, you guys interfered with the 2020 election by suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story, and then tried to rig the 2024 election by censoring any voice that was speaking out in favor of the policy positions that put America first, that Donald Trump is the leader of. And so I think that's what Zuckerberg's doing. But let me say two things. Number one, there's government censorship that violates the First Amendment, and that's bad and wrong. And we're going to use the case Missouri v. Biden and merits discovery to root out the vast censorship enterprise and build a wall of separation between tech and state to protect our First Amendment rights. But then there's corporate censorship, and that's going to go on regardless of whether or not we can get the government out of the censorship game, because the big tech oligarchs also don't want your voices heard. I mean, how many times have you been shadow banned, deplatformed, de-emphasized, and you may not even know that's happening? So it's a much more clandestine and nefarious form of censorship than at any point in human history. When King George shut down a printing press, everyone knew he had done it, and he only silenced the written word. But when you're shadow banned, deplatformed, de-emphasized, you and your listeners your audience may not know that their rights have been violated, and their audience is being deprived of the spoken word, the written word, body language, visual imagery. So it's a much more robust form of communication that's being censored, and that's what makes it so dangerous.
Yeah, the shadow banning thing really upsets me the most, because people, it's like gaslighting people. They spin in circles, and maybe they have some of the best ideas. And they think their ideas are bad because no one's listening, their views are down, or no one's engaging with it. It could be the best idea out there. And how much innovation are we suppressing and are we killing by shadow banning people? Because they give up. They think my voice doesn't matter. Yeah. Apparently people don't care. It must have not been good. No, it was fantastic. It's not your fault at all.
Yeah. tyranny flourishes in the absence of free, fair, and open debate. The whole point of the First Amendment, the whole point of the right to free speech is that we have this competition of ideas where the best ideas prevail. And when our viewpoints, our ideas, our voice is driven from public discourse, then we will slouch towards tyranny. Don't be mistaken. The big tech oligarchs want to fundamentally reshape our culture by silencing people like you and me. And that's why the content creators in the Second Amendment community, in the patriotic community, are such a target for censorship, because the left can't tolerate you guys having those channels and those voices. And that's why they're going to work so hard to suppress you. And it may not be banning you from the platform. It may be as simple as turning a dial to reduce your audience or reduce your reach. We've got to fight back against that too. And I think state attorneys general have a role to play. I think antitrust law is one avenue, one line of approach. And I think also consumer protection law. I can't go to the grocery store and buy a product without seeing a warning label about what's in the product I'm buying. And yet I'm using a medium of communication. And again, people are turning the dials, and I don't know what risks or rewards are available based on their censorship, because they won't explain the censorship algorithms to us.
Right.
I think we should do like a TikTok live and get you on, and then we will talk about gun rights, and we'll see how fast that live stream gets shut down. I think that'd be really funny.
Well, we even get off the ground. I mean, that's
we'll put a timer in the corner and just have a
timer in
ticker
the
on
corner
it.
and see how fast. They're like, you guys know he just took down, right? Well, and maybe you'll see firsthand how bad it really is.
They're so scared of freedom. I mean, that's the thing. Like, they don't like freedom because they're scared of it. They want to control people because then they don't have to be afraid. And we celebrate freedom because we exercise our freedoms responsibly, and we understand that the freedom given to us by our founding fathers, protected by subsequent generations, is timeless principles designed to make our lives better and give us the full enjoyment of the lives God gave us. And so that's why it's so important to have these voices in these channels and to speak out.
I can't wait. I can't wait to get canceled together. I'm gonna put that on my wall. I'm gonna make a video about
that's what it's
I'm gonna be so
come to,
excited. Get canceled together at the same time. Maybe we'll get blocked and banned together too. That'd be amazing.
It's just it's crazy that they think that voters, constituents, American citizens are so ill-informed, and they do think that they're stupid. I firmly believe that this administration, big tech oligarchs, they think that we're stupid because they think that they can put a Band-Aid on it, like this letter, for instance, following up on Zuckerberg, of course, making those comments about the assassination attempt, and somewhat, I think, leaning into trying to have a conservative media arc. I think people see it. I don't think it's working. But it's fascinating that they think that they can pull the wool over our eyes that easily. And it's just a testament to how long and how well it's been working and how long they've been doing it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they've been successful at it so far, and it's going to take shining the light of truth on it. One element of the conversation we haven't covered yet, but it's really Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, and that's a federal law that was enacted in the 1990s that helped grow the internet, and it basically is used as both a sword and a shield by the big tech oligarchy, and it's allowed the big tech marketplace to grow in the way that it has, where power is concentrated in very few, and consumers aren't being served, the consumers' best interests aren't being met, and the marketplace is not functioning in a free and fair, open way. And so when I talk about antitrust litigation, that's really what I'm referring to. The Section 230 of the CDA allows first of all, it prohibits it allows the big tech companies to exist without liability as publishers. So in other words, things that are said on their platforms, they're not liable for in a traditional sense under common law. However, it also empowers them explicitly to censor. So it's the shield that they're shielded from liability, but it's the sword and that they're empowered to censor voices. We need to go into Section 230 of the CDA and repeal the sword provision and make it to where they're not allowed to censor. And I would say that, in a traditional marketplace, there would be no open market impulses that would prevent censorship. You and I would say, well, we don't want to use that product because they're going to silence us or limit us. We're going to use this other product, which is better for our voice. But again, when you have that concentration of power in big tech, those normal impulses are not present.
But people know places like TikTok censor because we deal with it all the time. but yet people still go back because their app is that good. And that's
Yeah.
also the problem, right? If people said TikTok is censoring too much, we're just not going to use the app, and people got away from it, then maybe there's more power and there's a little more leverage. People say they care, but do they really care?
I think we need to make people care, and we do that by having conversations like this. I mean, I think this is the first step in making people care. People need to understand why this stuff is important, what's going on, and we need to shine the light of truth on it. I am confident in the merits of our argument. We just need a forum in which to make the argument, and we will prevail.
Now, the Section 230 thing you were talking about, is that related to, there's an executive order that President Trump passed at the end of his administration that worked to, I think, not overturn a piece of that. I'm going to get the details wrong, but what was the thing he passed about making, kind of what you said, making social media giants aggregators and publishers, and that held them responsible? I'm forgetting the executive order number, but is that any way helpful or related to that?
Yeah, I think President Trump is very well conscious of what's going on because he's been the victim of it. They want to silence his voice. They don't want him being the leader of a America First movement. They don't want him protecting the freedoms that we enjoy. And so they're going to find every way, shape, and form to silence him. Again, they can't win the argument on the merits, so they have to drive his voice from public discourse. He's been the victim of that. And so I think he and his team definitely see the need to reshape the battlefield here in order to preserve freedom.
Absolutely.
I think ultimately it requires congressional action. You know, at the end of the day, Section 230 of the CDA is a law that was enacted by Congress. And so it's going to take Congress going in and repealing the sword provision. And long term, I think that's the world we need to live in. But in the short term, I think that state attorneys general have a role to play as well.
Let's move into men and women's sports. Hot topic. People obviously I can't believe, first off, I can't believe this is an issue. I can't believe we're talking about this. This is the most ridiculous thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I have a daughter, and you know, I want to protect my daughter's ability to feel safe in a restroom, in a locker room, in a hotel room if she's traveling overnight for an athletic competition. For 50 years, Title IX has created equality for women in sports and especially in public accommodations. And yet, with the stroke of a pen, the Biden-Harris administration tried to rewrite the law. Well, the president can't rewrite law. Only Congress can do that. And what President Biden wanted to do through the rewrite of a Title IX rule was to give men access to women's restrooms, women's locker rooms, and women's athletic competitions. This is absolute insanity. Who's for this? Who thinks this is a good idea? Not only is it a constitutional problem, it's the wrong policy position, and it would undermine women's equality. Proud to say I led a coalition of states that fought back. We obtained an injunction in federal court, and that injunction is held to put a stop to Biden's illegal attack on equality for women.
Yeah, this is something that just feels like common sense. I can't believe, I'm with Matt. I can't believe that this is a conversation that we're having. I go on these media things and they're like, oh, what do you think about men and women's sports? I'm like, I can't believe this is a question. I think it's nonsensical. And I'm fascinated by the very long trajectory of, I feel like, the left trying to attack this aspect. And it's one that I think is maybe most radical of their platform. There's a lot of radical things, but the fact that this is treated like a common sense policy provision is wild to me. But this was something that was even rewritten, as you know, when Obama was in office under the Obama administration. President Trump, I think, reverted it day one with Betsy DeVos. And the fact that it was being attacked that long ago just shows us that they're trying to pick at facets, I think, that are should be common sense things. I don't know if it's to make constituents feel, nuts for believing the things that they believe. I really don't know where it comes from, but I think it's wild that this isn't common sense.
Well, and it's wild because it's so flies in the face of objective reality. In my mind, like, there are things that exist independent of my brain. The law of gravity being one of them. It doesn't matter how I feel about the law of gravity. If I jump off a building, I'm going to hurt myself. So, denying objective reality is not safe or healthy. And that's true in the gender context. That's true in the law of gravity context. That's true when we're talking about any objective reality. We need to live in and operate around objective reality. I think this is a fashion statement. I think it's a disgusting, and I think there's some mental health concerns that underlie
Yes.
a lot of this fashion statement. I think that the president and the vice president, Kamala Harris, are absolutely 100% wrong in this policy position, and it's going to make girls less safe, women and girls less safe. I also think that at the end of the day, President Trump needs to win in November, and let's retake sanity in America. Let's make sanity great again. And, I think there's a lot of work to do between now and then to get that done. We're on a short timeline here. We got 70 something days, maybe less, between now and the national election. And so, conversations like this are important to help people understand, the future of this country is at stake, and we've all got to get engaged to move this thing forward.
Absolutely. And kind of to that, I have two questions. As far as, and I know you guys were a big part of leading the coalition of states against this, as you've said, which is fantastic. But walk us through, this feels like a state level thing at the very least. You can't have the federal government stepping in here and saying this is how each state needs to run their education. At the very least, this should be a protected state right, in my opinion. Can you walk us through that and how this is not just a common sense overreach, but a constitutional one?
Well, it's a constitutional overreach for several reasons. Number one, again, the president tried to rewrite a law with the stroke of a pen. Well, Congress passes law, not the president. And this deals with that alphabet soup of federal bureaucratic agencies. These are unelected federal bureaucrats that live in an unauthorized fourth branch of government. Our founding fathers understood that we'd have a federal government of limited authority, and that authority would be diffused over three co-equal branches of government, that you would never concentrate power, rulemaking, rule enforcing, and rule adjudicatory power in one branch of government. And yet that's what that alphabet soup of federal agencies is. This is a form of soft despotism that is antithetical to our constitutional structure. But then the president exceeds the scope of statutory authority. Congress writes the law. The president can't expand on that law with a rule. And so there's an administrative law problem. And especially with the overturning of the Chevron decision, these federal agencies should get no deference in them trying to expand their own legal authority. And I think that's the world we live in now post Chevron. But then, at the end of the day, why do we have a Department of Education at the federal level? Like, why does that exist? It's, I don't see any enumerated authority in the Constitution for the federal government to regulate education. It doesn't exist. That we've got to start slashing and burning these federal agencies that are really just government job welfare programs.
Absolutely. And I think that seeing that decision as, you have President Trump who said that he'd like to get rid of the Department of Education as part of his policy, compared to, Kamala Harris, who in her work in California tried to convict parents of truancy just for not sending their kids to state school. The choice is so clear. I think it's insanity. Yeah,
for sure.
Can you make a argument? I'm trying to understand the other side. Why anyone would think this is a good idea? Can anyone, either of you, make an argument for letting women in men's bathrooms, or letting men in women's bathrooms, or letting men in women's sports? I don't understand what the possible argument for is.
Well, you have to reject objective reality to even begin the argument on the other side. You have to say that there's no such thing as gender, which we know is not true. Like, God created man and woman. It's in our DNA. There's physical differences between man and woman. I mean, that is objectively true, regardless of what our brains think about it. But you have to abandon that and go down this rabbit hole of you can be whatever gender you want, and the rules don't, nothing matters, and so anything goes. I mean, that's where you start if you're on the other side. But again, this is a public safety thing. As a prosecutor, I actually prosecuted the leading case in the state of Missouri on criminal trespass for a male convicted sex offender hiding in a women's restroom looking for additional victims. He wasn't there to express his gender identity. He was there to perp on new victims, and luckily law enforcement intercepted him, and we prosecuted him before he could do that. But that's what we're up against. That's what I don't want happening to my daughter, or your daughter, or your children, your grandchildren. I mean, that's what we got to fight against. This is a public safety concern.
I think that's an important point too, because I think that on the kind of other side of it, people who are deciding which issues they feel passionate about and want to get involved in, right now it's a comprehensive Save America project, so I'm all in on everything. But when people are really looking at this, I think that explaining the application and just even what you just said where it does expand beyond women's sports, because I think the argument starts with women's sports because that's what's been so public about it, but it really does expand into all facets. And so I think it's great that we're highlighting those examples. And then, Matt, to answer your question on my side of things, I lean on, biblical chaos. Sometimes I feel like they're trying to just, if you take things enough out of order, you enact chaos, nothing can thrive in that environment. That's not God's creation. That's not God's plan. I just think that for me, it really starts to get in that facet of things. And I don't know. I think that it's really just taking things out of order on purpose.
I think you had one more. Alexis, what was the last one?
I do. Just to discuss the student loan forgiveness and the SCOTUS ruling, and just thoughts on that. Why have they tried so many times to do this? I know that they're purchasing votes. It's pretty evident, but how do they keep trying this different ways in order to get it through?
Well, Biden and Harris don't care about the law. They don't care about the Constitution. They care about buying votes, and they're willing to ignore the Constitution, the law, and a co-equal third branch of government, the highest court in the land. They're willing to set all that aside, ignore it, and reject it, and be willfully defiant to those things in order to win an election. It's never about helping people. It's always about retaining control. That's what they're dedicated to. The Constitution, again, gives the power of the purse, the power to make policy decisions about redistribution of wealth, to Congress, not the president. And Congress has not enacted any statute that allows the president to redistribute a $500 billion in student loan debt. Missouri is integral to this case because here in Missouri, we have the Missouri Higher Education Loan Authority, or MOHELA, which administers student loans and student loan repayment. And the General Assembly has to fund that. So it hurts Missourians to the tune of north of $44 million. That's going to leave a gap in our state revenue. That's why we filed suit the first time, took it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and won to shut down President Biden's unconstitutional attempt to redistribute wealth. He went back to the well, came up with Plan B. We put a stop to it as well. And just this week, the Supreme Court said, enough is enough. You are not allowed to do this, Biden and Harris. And again, that's the right constitutional answer. I'm not going to let Joe Biden and Kamala Harris saddle working Missouri families with Ivy League debt.
Has anyone actually received the loan forgiveness? Has that happened yet?
I went to school on an Army ROTC scholarship and then deployed to Iraq twice and paid for law school on the post 9/11 GI Bill. So this is all very personal for me. Like, I have friends who did the same thing who didn't come home from Iraq. And so, this idea that something's free, any small business owner or working family will tell you, nobody's canceling debt. That's not, somebody's paying that off. And for those of us that, for working families that decided not to go to school to avoid taking on that kind of debt, or for those of us who found other ways to pay for school, it's really offensive that the president would just defy the United States Supreme Court and undermine the honor of, going to work or finding a way to pay for your school.
Right.
Amazing.
It's a crazy world. I mean, you've got a president who's willfully defying the United States Supreme Court. Imagine if President Trump had done that. Imagine if any Republican had done that. And the media just completely lets him off the hook. At what point do they start calling this a constitutional crisis, which is really what it is?
Right. No, exactly. At the same time that they're talking about changing the legislative structure, changing the judicial structure, they want to pack the court, they want to do all of these things. And it's just, they're attacking the machine at the same time that they're attacking individual states, individual citizens. I think that my question to you is, what do we, as citizens of each of our individual states, what can we encourage our attorneys general to do? What can we do as people? I'm all about problems with solutions, as I know that you guys are too. So how do we have viewers move forward feeling like they have a way out or a way to help? I think everyone wants to find a way to help right now. What would your advice be?
Well, first and foremost, we have to win the election in November. I mean, everyone hears, oh, this is the most critical election in our nation's history. Well, this time it's true. And let me say this. I hear people all the time. They're like, well, I don't vote because, it doesn't matter. We can make this thing too big to rig. I want everybody in the audience to think about that statement. Make it too big to rig. If every gun owner, if every hunter, if every sportsman, if everybody who loves the Second Amendment, make sure you're registered to vote by going to voteforamerica.org, Vote number 4america.org. Sign yourself up to vote. Get a friend, a neighbor, someone you go to church with, somebody you hang out with, somebody you shoot or hunt with. Sign them up to vote, and then go one step further and take them to the polling place in November. Show up and fight on just one day. Register to vote. Register your friends and family to vote. Take them to the polling place in November. Add that layer of accountability and take them with you, and we will make it too big to rig. If you care about the Second Amendment, if you care about your right to keep and bear arms, go vote. Take someone with you. Make it too big to rig. Visit voteforamerica.org to make it happen.
And can we add on that maybe one person is just not enough? Maybe you have to take 4.
I love that. Yes. Get as many as you can. Yeah, absolutely.
We need a party bus program just to take people to go vote. Truly, bring all of your friends, especially since you mentioned gun owners. Gun owners are the lowest registered demographic, I think, in the U.S.
Crazy.
So you guys, register, get out there, even if it's just this time. I mean, I'm going to always encourage everyone to vote, but just this time, please go vote. I'm totally with you on that.
And what we're going to do is, Alexis and I, we're going to do a live stream on Instagram on Election Day. And anyone that's in line, getting ready to vote, we'll let you come into the live and shout people out and do it so that we make a party out of voting. Because at least we'll hold people accountable. And if you see people going out there physically voting, maybe you're like, all right, fine, I'll go. Maybe you'll get off your ass and you'll go do something,
Hey, I want to talk to you on Election Day then, because I'm going to go vote. I got a critical election in my state. I'm running for election against a Democrat here in Missouri, and we've got to win Missouri. Missouri's an important state on the national scale on so many of these issues. And as you've talked about, we've led on so many of these issues. And so I want to talk to you on Election Day and maybe try to get in there and give my shout out too. I will be at the polling place with my family. I'm encouraging folks to go vote, and I want everybody to check out baileymo.com. That's my website. Love folks' support. If you love the Second Amendment, you love freedom, love you to sign on to help me out to get this thing across the finish line in November.
Absolutely.
General Bailey, can I call you that? Andrew?
I'm just Andrew, man, but I appreciate you.
Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show. Alexis, thank you for joining us today. And we're going to do it again before the election because there's so much going on, and we'd love to have you back to give more insight.
Look forward to it, guys. Hope I pass the test.
Amazing.
Crushed it.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you.